And we're back with more of the 18th chapter of The Sword and the Stone. The wart has been turned into an owl, and he and Merlin's owl, Archimedes, are flying off to meet the goddess Athena, who is the goddess of wisdom and whose totem animal is the owl. It was a long and terrible journey, passing beyond the solitude into the undiscovered country of Kennequar, whose latitude is 91 degrees north and longitude 181 degrees west. Here in the luminous hollow of a tree stump that had been blasted by lightning and whittled clean by the winds of knowledge, they alighted on the outstretched hands of the goddess. Athena was invisible, or at least the wart never remembered having seen her afterward. At the time, he did not notice that she was invisible. It only struck him when he woke up the next morning, because he was aware of her without seeing her. He was aware that her unthinkable beauty was neither that of age nor youth, that her eyes were the only things you thought of looking at, and that to be her was terrible, whereas to be with her was only joy. If you can understand this, she was in herself so unhappy that words only melt in such temperatures. But toward other people, she was the spirit of invincible mercy and protection. She lived, of course, beyond sorrow and solitude, and if you follow me, the suffering which had brought her there, had left her with a kind of supernatural good manners. She was a conqueror. Archimedes kissed her tenderly. He was not overawed by her, but saluted her almost with pity, as if he were a man of the world visiting his sister, a nun who did not understand how to get on in his world, or perhaps a prosperous banker who had always tried to be reasonably decent, meeting the man whose destiny it was to be nailed up and left to die of sunstroke, agony, exhaustion in order to save the prosperous bankers. Even Archimedes did not understand her. She knew this. "Hail, mother!" said Archimedes. "I have brought you a young human who is to learn things by decree." When the wart came to think about it afterward, he realized that he had not only never seen the goddess, but that he had also never heard her speak. The owl spoke, and he spoke, but the words of Athena did not come out of a mouth. "This part," Archimedes said with a sort of purr, "is the rate of 30 years in a minute. It is one of our owl's dreams, you know, such as we gain our wisdom from it in the sighing of the night." Athena did not speak, but she held the wart in the hollow of her kind hand, and he knew that he was to look in front of him. He saw the world with his own eyes now, no longer using the strange spectrum which he had experienced since he came out with Archimedes, and no doubt this was done in order to make things easier for him. They needed to be made easier, for it was now his business to watch a world in which a year passed in 2 seconds. It was a world of trees. "We dream of this," explained Archimedes, "when we perch on a tree in the winds of winter, or sleep in its hollow in the rains of spring." Sometimes, nowadays, you can see a cinema film of a flower, for instance, in which one exposure has been taken every hour. In it you see the petals expand and throb, open or shut, for day or night, until the whole story is over and the seeds have been thrown out upon the wind. There was a woodland now in front of the wart, and in it an oak sapling which grew, flourished, and shed its leaves into nakedness all the time during which you could slowly count 3. A whole year had passed in that time, with all its human joys and sorrow. "This," said Athena, or at any rate what she seemed to be saying in the most glorious of voices, "is called the dream of the trees." People don't think of trees as alive. We never see them moving unless the wind disturbs them, and then it is not their movement but the wind's. The wart saw now that trees are living and do move. He saw all that forest, like seaweed on the ocean's floor, how the branches rose and groped about and waved, how they panted forth their leaves like breathing, and indeed they were breathing. And what is still more extraordinary, how they talked. If you should be at a cinema when the talking apparatus breaks down, you may have the experience of hearing it start again too slowly. Then you will hear the words which would be real words at a proper speed, now droning out unintelligibly in long roars and sighs which give no meaning to the human brain. The same thing happens with a gramophone, whose disc is not revolving fast. So it was with the humans. We cannot hear the trees talking except as a vague noise of roaring and hushing which we attribute to the wind and the leaves, because they talk too slowly for us. These noises are really the syllables and vowels of the trees. You may speak for yourselves, said Athena. Oak spoke first, as became the noblest of all. He stood, throbbing his leaves in the twilight, to which time had mixed down day and night, stretching out his great muscular branches, yawning, as it were, like a noble giant of the earth who cracks his limbs in the morning when he wakes. "Ah," said the oak, "it is good to be alive. Look at my biceps, will you? Do you see how the other trees are afraid of gravity, afraid that he will break their branches off? They point them up in the air or down to the ground, so as to give the old earth giant his least purchase upon them. Now I am ready to challenge gravity, and I can stretch my branches straight out in a line parallel to the earth. He may swing on them, for all I care, but bless you, they won't break. Do you know how long I live? 1,000 years is my expectation. 300 years to grow, 300 years to live, 300 years to die. And when I am dead, what of that? They make me into timber, into ships and house beams that will be good for another 1,000. My leaves come the last and go the last. I am a conservative, I am. And out of my apples they make ink whose words may live as long as me, even as me, the oak." Ash said softly, "I am the Venus of the forest. I am pliable." "My dear madam," said a rather society box in smirking, urbane, scholastic 18th century accents, "a decalcation of boxwood promotes the growth of hair, while an oil distilled from its shaving is a cure for hairmords, toothache, epilepsy, and stomach worms. So at least we are told." "If it comes to being sarcastic," replied a homely Hazel, who was a good fellow at heart, although he was inclined to snap, "may I mention that hazel chips will clear turbid wine in 24 hours, and twigs of hazel twisted together will serve for yeast in brewing. You may be a sort of Lord Chesterfield, but at least you will have to yield to me in the matter of genteel tipsification practiced by the elegant gentlemen of your century." "As far as drink goes," said an impossible female ivy, who was always clinging to her husband, putting her oar in and making his life a misery, "ground ivy is used for clarifying beer." She simpered when she said the word beer in a most unpleasant way. She was a sour creature in any light. "I don't know why you are talking about drink," said a dignified beech, "but if we are talking about it, I may as well mention that Virgil's drinking bowl, Divini Opus Acclamodius, was turned out of my wood." "Great men," remarked a close-grained svelte lime, "are always going back to the trees. Grinning Gibbons would never carve his nets and baskets out of anything but me." "And Salvator Rosa," said the chestnut, "was always painting me." "Corot," said the willow, sighing, "was fond of me." "How your humans do spin about," remarked the crafty elm coldly. "What a speed they live at! It is rather good sport trying to spot them, and then to drop an old bough on their heads if you can get them directly underneath. But of course you have to stand very still and give no sign of dropping it till the actual moment. The cream of the joke is that they make the coffins out of me afterwards." "You always were a treacherous fellow," replied an old ewe. What's the point of it? Surely it's better to live than to hinder. Now Oak here, and a few others of us, we take pride in keeping faith. We like to be steadfast. Everybody prizes me because, like alder, I scorn to rot in water. My gateposts are more durable than iron, for they do not even rust. Yes, chimed in some cypresses, sycamores, and others. Live and let live, that's the best motto. We and our sisters are always pleased to see the grass growing under our shade. On the contrary, said a fir, who always killed the grass beneath him, and a nervous aspen joined in. Kill or be killed, that's the way to get on. But please, don't talk of killing, added the aspen. The cross was made out of me, and I have trembled ever since. I only kill, you know, because I am frightened. It is a terrible thing to always be afraid. A cedar decided to cheer her up. Oh, come, he remarked, twinkling his dusty spines. What's the point of all this argument and boasting about your powers? It seems to me that you all take life too seriously. Look at my old friend Sequoia here. He who has the humorous idea of constructing himself a very hard-looking bark out of soft blotting paper, so that you can punch him without hurting yourself. If it comes to that, look at me. What is my mission in life? You may think it a humble one, considering my size, but I find it amusing, and I am antipathetic to fleas. All the trees laughed at this. It resulted in a splendid summer that year, and decided to go on with their dance. It was a sort of Indian dance, in which they moved their bodies but not their feet, and a very graceful one it was. The wart watched while the whole troop of them rippled their twigs like serpents, or made slow ritual gestures about their heads and bodies with the larger boughs. He saw how they grew big and lusty in their dancing, how they threw their arms out toward heaven in ecstasy of being alive. The younger trees tired first. The little fruit trees stopped waving, hung their weary heads for a moment, then fell down on the ground. The big ones moved more slowly, faltered, and fell one by one till only Oak was left. He stood with his chin sunk upon his chest, kept upright by his mighty will, thinking of the lovely dance which now was over. He sighed and looked upward at Athena, stretched out his bare arms sorrowfully to her to ask her why, and then also fell on sleep. The next dream, said Athena, is called the Dream of the Stones. And we will pause there.